Welcome to my channel, a lead that bring your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The music pulsed through the floorboards, vibrating up through my worn stilettos and into my tired legs. The chandelier above cast fractured light across the sea of wealthy bodies swaying in designer fabrics. I didn't belong here, not in this glittering ballroom with its crystal stemware and perfume that cost more than my monthly rent. But I needed the money, and catering paid well for these charity galas. "Emma, table 6 needs champagne refills," Maggie hissed as she passed, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than all the groceries in my refrigerator. I nodded, adjusting the uncomfortable black bow tie of my server's uniform. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders. 3 jobs, barely enough sleep, and the constant worry about my sister's medical bills hanging over me like a storm cloud. I was invisible here, just another pair of hands refilling glasses, collecting empty plates, and disappearing into the background. As I weaved through the crowd with my tray of champagne flutes, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Someone was watching me. I could feel it. A gaze heavy enough to make my skin prickle beneath my starched white shirt. I glanced up and froze. He stood apart from the crowd, though people orbited around him like satellites unable to break free of gravitational pull. Tall, with broad shoulders draped in a suit that looked like it had been painted onto his frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance statue, all sharp angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that caught me, dark as midnight, and fixed directly on mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Unlike the other guests who looked through me, he was seeing me. Really seeing me. I dropped my gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs as I continued toward table 6. The champagne in my glasses trembled slightly with each step. I felt his eyes follow me across the room, tracking my movements as I refilled glasses with mechanical precision. "Who is that man?" I whispered to Maggie when I returned to the service area, nodding discreetly toward him. She glanced over and her eyes widened. "No idea, but whoever he is, he's important. Look at his security." She nodded toward 2 men standing at a careful distance from him, their eyes constantly scanning the room, hands positioned to reach inside their jackets at a moment's notice. "Ladies," our supervisor's sharp voice cut through our whispers. Less chatting, more serving. For the next hour, I tried to ignore his presence, but it was like trying to ignore gravity. Whenever I glanced in his direction, his eyes were waiting for mine. It was unsettling, and yet thrilling in a way I hadn't felt in years. In my world of double shifts and overdue bills, there was little room for the rush of being noticed. It was nearing midnight when the band switched from background music to something more vibrant. The dance floor filled as the alcohol loosened inhibitions and wallets. I was clearing glasses from an abandoned table when I felt him behind me. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice deep and smooth as aged whiskey. I turned, suddenly aware of how close he was. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something earthy and expensive that made my head swim. "I'm working, sir," I replied, clinging to professionalism like a shield. He took the tray from my hands and set it on the table. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can't. I'll lose my job." The protest sounded weak even to my own ears. His lips curved into the slightest smile. "No, you won't." I should have walked away, should have reclaimed my tray and disappeared into the service corridors. Instead, I let him lead me onto the dance floor, where his hand settled at the small of my back, warm and sure. "I don't even know your name," I said, as he guided me effortlessly through the other couples. "Alexi," he replied, his accent wrapping around the word in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "And yours?" "Emma," I breathed. "Emma," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Why do you look so sad behind those pretty eyes, Emma?" The question caught me off guard. No one asked about the shadows under my eyes, or the worry lines etching themselves between my brows. I was background noise in other people's lives. "Life is complicated," I finally said. "Life is always complicated." His hand tightened slightly on mine, but for this moment, it doesn't have to be. As we moved across the floor, I noticed others watching us. The women looked at me with curious disdain. The men regarded Alexei with cautious deference. One of his security men spoke urgently into his sleeve, eyes fixed on us. "Your bodyguard seems concerned," I noted, trying to lighten the strange intensity between us. Alexei's eyes darkened. "They're paid to be concerned. Ignore them." The song ended, but he didn't release me. Instead, he leaned closer, his lips near my ear. "You shouldn't have danced with me, Emma." I pulled back slightly to look at his face. "Why not?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Because now I've seen you, and I don't let go of things that interest me." Before I could respond, one of his men approached and murmured something in a language I didn't recognize. Alexei's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "I have to go," he said. His eyes still locked on mine. "But this isn't over." He released me and stepped back, leaving me suddenly cold in the middle of the crowded dance floor. I watched, frozen in place, as he moved through the crowd, people instinctively creating a path for him. At the exit, he paused and looked back at me, his gaze burning into mine for one last moment before he disappeared. I stood there, pulse racing, until Maggie appeared at my side and grabbed my arm. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "Do you know who that was?" I shook my head, still staring at the doorway where he'd vanished. "That was Alexei Volkov, the Alexei Volkov." The name meant nothing to me. The Russian? The one who supposedly owns half of downtown but no one ever sees? "Emma, there are rumors about what happens to people who cross him." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They say he's connected, like seriously connected." A chill ran through me as the implications of her words sank in. Mafia. She was saying he was mafia. It was just a dance, I said weakly. Maggie's grip tightened. "Nothing is just anything with men like him. Watch yourself." I nodded. But inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had just happened. Like I'd stepped off a cliff without realizing it. And now I was in free fall. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I kept expecting to see him return, kept feeling phantom eyes on my back. But he was gone. When my shift ended at 2 a.m., I changed back into my street clothes, jeans, and a worn sweater that felt like armor after the exposure of the dance floor. "Need a ride?" Maggie asked as we gathered our things. "No, I'm good. The bus stop is just a block away." She frowned. "After tonight, maybe you shouldn't. It was just a dance," I repeated, more firmly this time. I'll never see him again. But even as I said it, I didn't believe my own words. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. The streets were quiet at this hour, the sidewalks empty except for a few stragglers leaving bars or heading to early morning shifts. I was halfway to the bus stop when a sleek black car pulled alongside me, moving at exactly my pace. My heart leaped into my throat as the rear window lowered. I kept walking, quickening my pace, eyes fixed ahead. "Emma." His voice stopped me in my tracks. Slowly, I turned. Alexei sat in the back seat, illuminated by the soft interior light of the car. Behind him, I could make out the silhouette of a driver and another man in the front passenger seat. "How did you know where I'd be?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Get in the car, Emma. It's late, and this neighborhood isn't safe." I glanced around. The street was deserted now. "I think I'll take my chances." His expression hardened. That wasn't a request. The fear and something else, something I didn't want to name, coiled in my stomach. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." "I know enough." He pushed the door open wider. "I know you work too hard. I know you're carrying a burden that's too heavy. And I know that someone as beautiful as you shouldn't be walking alone at this hour." His words wrapped around me like silk, tempting and dangerous. I took a step back. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm fine. Really." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. I got the impression he wasn't refused often. "At least let me drive you home." His voice softened, almost gentle now. No strings attached. I hesitated, torn between caution and exhaustion. The last bus would be arriving soon, but it would still be an hour before I got home, and I had an early shift at the diner tomorrow. "Just a ride home," I said finally, stepping toward the car. His smile was slight but victorious as I slid into the leather seat beside him. The door closed with a soft, expensive thunk that seemed to seal my fate. As the car pulled away from the curb, I realized I'd just made a terrible mistake, but looking into Alexei's dark eyes, watching as satisfaction settled over his features, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. The interior of the car smelled of leather, and Alexei's cologne, a scent I was already beginning to recognize. The privacy partition was up, sealing us away from his men in the front seat. Through the tinted windows, the city slid by in a blur of streetlights and shadows. "Your address?" Alexei asked, his voice filling the quiet space between us. I hesitated, suddenly uncomfortable with the idea of him knowing where I lived. "You can drop me at the corner of Elm and 23rd. His eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not your home. It's close enough." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once to himself, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "You don't trust me." "I don't know you," I countered. "And yet you got into my car." The observation hung between us, neither accusation nor compliment, just fact. I looked away, watching the buildings grow shabbier as we left downtown behind. Maybe that was a mistake. "No," he said with such certainty that my eyes snapped back to his. It wasn't. He reached into his jacket, and I tensed involuntarily. A flicker of something, hurt, perhaps, crossed his face before he pulled out a business card. He held it out to me, but when I reached for it, he kept hold, forcing me to look at him. "My private number," he said. "Not my assistant's, not my secretary's. Mine. No one has this but you." The weight of that statement wasn't lost on me. I tugged the card from his fingers and glanced down. It was simple. Expensive cardstock with just his name and a phone number embossed in dark ink. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked, turning the card over in my hands. "Call me when you're ready." "Ready for what?" His lips curved into that barely there smile again. "To stop running." Before I could ask what he meant, the car slowed to a stop. We'd reached the corner I'd indicated. "Thank you for the ride," I said, tucking the card into my pocket and reaching for the door handle. His hand covered mine, warm and firm. "Emma." The way he said my name, like it belonged to him somehow, made my breath catch. "The next time I see you, it won't be by chance." I slipped my hand from beneath his and pushed the door open, needing air that wasn't filled with his presence. "Good night, Alexei." I felt his eyes on me as I walked the 3 blocks to my actual apartment building, but the car didn't follow. It remained at the corner until I was out of sight, a dark sentinel in the night. My apartment was small, barely more than a studio with a kitchenette and bathroom so tiny I had to turn sideways to get past the sink. But it was mine, paid for with countless double shifts and careful budgeting. I locked the door behind me, then double-checked it before leaning against the wall and exhaling slowly. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Sweet dreams, Emma." My heart stuttered. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. The implications of that, of what else he might know about me, sent a chill down my spine. I turned off my phone without replying, and tried to push the encounter from my mind as I prepared for bed, but sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, felt his hand at the small of my back, heard his voice murmuring in my ear. "You shouldn't have danced with me." The morning came too quickly. I dragged myself through my shift at Rosie's diner, serving pancakes and coffee to the early crowd with mechanical efficiency. My mind was elsewhere, caught between the memory of last night and worry about my sister Lily. At 30, I was 5 years older than Lily, and since our parents died in the car accident 6 years ago, I'd become her de facto guardian, her caretaker, the one who made sure her medical bills were paid, her prescriptions filled, the one who worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. Lily's lupus had been in remission when our parents died, but the stress of losing them had triggered a flare-up that never fully subsided. Now she spent most days too exhausted to leave her apartment, which was just down the hall from mine. I checked on her between shifts, brought her groceries, made sure she took her medication. It was exhausting, but what choice did I have? She was my sister, my responsibility. "Earth to Emma," Rosie said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. Table 7's been waiting on their check for 10 minutes. Sorry, I mumbled, hurrying to close out the table. By the time my shift ended at 2 p.m., my feet were screaming and my back ached from carrying heavy trays. I stopped at the pharmacy on my way home to pick up Lily's new prescription, wincing at the copay amount. Even with insurance, it was steep. I'd have to pick up an extra shift this week to cover it. When I reached Lily's apartment, I found her curled on the couch, pale and drawn. Her dark hair, so like my own, was pulled back in a messy bun, and the shadows under her eyes seemed deeper than they had been yesterday. Bad day? I asked, setting my bag down and moving to feel her forehead. She nodded weakly. Couldn't sleep. The pain was worse last night. I frowned, concern and guilt twisting together in my chest. While I'd been dancing with a stranger, my sister had been suffering alone. I got your new prescription, I said, taking the orange bottle from my bag. Dr. Michaels thinks it might help with the inflammation. Lily took the bottle, examining the label. How much was it? Don't worry about that. She looked up at me, her eyes, the same hazel as mine, filled with a familiar guilt. Em, you can't keep doing this. You're working yourself to death for me. I'm fine, I insisted, moving to her kitchen to make tea. It was an old argument, one we'd had dozens of times. Besides, I might have a lead on something better. The lie slipped out before I could stop it. I wasn't sure why I said it, perhaps to ease her worry, or perhaps because some part of me was still turning over Alexi's words from the night before. Call me when you're ready. Ready for what? A job? Something else? The uncertainty should have frightened me, but instead, I found myself fingering the business card in my pocket as I waited for the kettle to boil. What kind of lead? Lily asked, perking up slightly. Just someone I met, I hedged, focusing on pouring the hot water into mugs. It might not pan out. Don't get your hopes up. She studied my face as I handed her the tea. There's something different about you today. I forced a laugh. Yeah, exhaustion. Looks great on me, doesn't it? No, it's not that. Her head tilted slightly. You met someone. It's not like that, I said quickly. Too quickly. A small smile played at her lips, the first I'd seen in days. Okay, sure. Who is he? No one. Just a guy at the gala last night. It doesn't matter. I busied myself straightening the magazines on her coffee table. Have you eaten today? She allowed the subject change, and I spent the next hour making her a simple dinner and catching up on her laundry. By the time I left her apartment, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the grimy windows of the hallway. My phone, which I'd turned back on before my diner shift, buzzed in my pocket. Another text from the unknown number. From Alexei. Dinner tonight? I'll send a car at 8. Not a question. A statement. As if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. I started to type a refusal, then paused. What would happen if I said yes? One dinner. One night away from the crushing responsibility and constant worry. Was that so wrong? Before I could overthink it, I typed, I have to check on my sister first. His response came immediately. The car will wait. I stared at my phone, torn between irritation at his presumption and a strange fluttering excitement. I hadn't been on a real date in... I couldn't remember how long. Between work and caring for Lily, there simply wasn't time. Fine. 8:30. And this time, I'll give the driver my actual address. I could almost feel his satisfaction through the phone. Wise choice. At precisely 8:30, a different car than the one from last night, this one a sleek silver sedan with tinted windows, idled outside my building. The driver, a stone-faced man in a dark suit, held the door open without a word. I'd spent the hour after checking on Lily ransacking my closet for something suitable. I'd settled on the only dress I owned that wasn't for work. A simple black wrap dress I'd bought years ago for a friend's wedding. It was nothing special, but it was clean and fit well enough. The car took me to a restaurant I'd passed many times but never entered. The kind of place where the menu had no prices and the waitstaff spoke in hushed tones. As the car pulled up to the entrance, my nerve nearly failed me. I didn't belong here, in this world of luxury and excess. But then the door opened, and Alexei was there, offering his hand. He'd changed from the tuxedo of last night into a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, making his shoulders look even broader, his waist narrower. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. "You came," he said, and there was something like relief in his voice. I said I would. I placed my hand in his, letting him help me from the car. His eyes traveled over me, taking in the simple dress, the minimal makeup, the hair I'd attempted to style but had eventually just left loose around my shoulders. "You're beautiful." The compliment was straightforward, lacking the smooth artifice I would have expected. It caught me off guard, making me blush like a schoolgirl. "Thank you," I managed, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't really have clothes for places like this." His hand settled at the small of my back, guiding me toward the entrance. "You could wear rags and still outshine everyone in this restaurant." Inside, the maitre d' practically bowed when he saw Alexei, escorting us immediately to a secluded table in the back corner, positioned so Alexei could see the entire restaurant while his back was to the wall. One of his security men took up position at a discreet distance, his eyes constantly scanning the room. "Is that really necessary?" I asked, nodding toward the guard as Alexei held my chair. "Yes," he said simply, taking his own seat. His eyes met mine across the table, dark and serious. "There are people who would use any perceived weakness against me, including you." I blinked, startled by his bluntness. "Me? If someone wanted to hurt me, they might target those I care about." The implications of that statement hung between us. Those I care about. We'd known each other less than 24 hours. And yet, there was something in his gaze that suggested this wasn't casual for him. Nothing about Alexei Volkov seemed casual. "Is that why you're here with me?" I asked, a new wariness creeping into my voice. "Because I'm a potential weakness to exploit?" His lips curved in that barely there smile. "I'm here with you, Emma, because from the moment I saw you last night, I haven't been able to think of anything else." His words settled over me like a physical weight, both thrilling and terrifying. I reached for my water glass, needing something to do with my hands. "You don't even know me," I said, echoing my words from the night before. "I know more than you think." He leaned forward slightly. "Emma Rose Sullivan, 29. Born in this city but spent summers with your grandparents in Vermont until you were 16. Parents deceased. Car accident 6 years ago. Younger sister, Lily, with systemic lupus erythematosus, diagnosed at 19. You work at Rosie's Diner 5 mornings a week, the public library 3 evenings, and take catering jobs on weekends. You live in apartment 4B at 1123 Westfield Avenue, in a building with questionable electrical wiring and a landlord who hasn't fixed the broken security door in the lobby for 8 months. Each fact he recited felt like another link in a chain, tightening around me. My hand froze halfway to my mouth, the water glass trembling slightly. "How do you—" "You're drowning in medical bills and student loans. Your sister's, not yours. You dropped out of college to care for her," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "You sleep an average of 5 hours a night, and you haven't bought yourself anything new in over a year." I set the glass down carefully, afraid I might drop it. "You've been investigating me." It wasn't a question. The knowledge that he'd been looking into my life, dissecting it, cataloging it, should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I felt a strange, unsettling mix of fear and fascination. "Of course I have." He said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I don't enter into any relationship without knowing exactly who I'm dealing with." Is that what this is? A relationship? The waiter approached with menus, but Alexei waved him away with a murmured instruction I couldn't catch. The man nodded deferentially and retreated. "That depends on you," Alexei said once we were alone again. "What I'm offering isn't casual, Emma. I don't do casual." "What exactly are you offering?" His eyes held mine, unwavering. "Solutions, security, an end to your constant struggle." I stiffened. "I'm not looking for a sugar daddy." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "That's not what I'm offering. I'm not interested in buying you, Emma. I'm interested in having you. There's a difference. The distinction sent a shiver down my spine. Not entirely unpleasant. And what would I have to do in return? Be mine. The simplicity of the statement belied its weight. Exclusively. Completely. The waiter returned with 2 glasses of champagne I didn't remember ordering. I reached for mine immediately, taking a sip to steady myself. The bubbles burst on my tongue, crisp and expensive. You're asking a lot from someone you just met, I said finally. I'm offering more. His voice softened slightly. Your sister's medical bills. Gone. A new apartment in a building with proper security, closer to her doctors. No more 60-hour work weeks just to keep your head above water. I took another sip of champagne, trying to gather my thoughts. You make it sound like you're rescuing me. Aren't I? The question hung between us as the waiter returned with our first course. Something delicate and artfully arranged that I couldn't identify. I hadn't seen Alexei order, hadn't seen a menu. Another indication of the control he was accustomed to wielding. What do you do, Alexei? I asked. Though I already suspected the answer from Maggie's warning. From the security. From the way others looked at him with a mixture of fear and deference. I have interests in various businesses, he replied smoothly. Real estate primarily. Some import-export operations. Nightclubs, private security. Vague enough to be legitimate, specific enough to sound like an answer. I wondered how much of it was truth. How much carefully constructed facade. And these interests? They're all legal? He set down his fork, studying me. Would it matter to you if they weren't? I should have said yes immediately. Instead, I found myself considering the question seriously. I don't know, I admitted finally. I've spent my entire adult life following the rules, working within the system. And where has it gotten me? Drowning in debt. Watching my sister suffer because I can't afford the treatments she needs, working myself to exhaustion just to stay afloat. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. The system isn't designed for people like you, Emma. It's designed to keep you exactly where you are, struggling enough that you don't have the energy to question why things are the way they are. His words resonated with thoughts I'd had late at night, in those moments between shifts when exhaustion made the barriers between acceptable and unacceptable thoughts more permeable. So what happens now? I asked, pushing my barely touched food aside. Now we finish our dinner. I take you home. And you think about my offer. His voice was calm, patient. I won't rush you, Emma. But I won't wait forever either. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of exquisite food I could barely taste and conversation that carefully skirted the edges of what had been laid out between us. Alexei asked about Lily, about my work, about the books I read in the stolen moments between responsibilities. He listened with an intensity that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. By the time the dessert plates were cleared away, I was no closer to a decision than I had been when we sat down. Part of me, the practical, responsible part that had kept Lily and me afloat for 6 years, screamed that this was dangerous, that men like Alexei didn't offer salvation without exacting a steep price. But another part, a part I'd kept buried beneath duty and exhaustion, whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop struggling alone. Outside, the same car waited at the curb. Alexei's hand at the small of my back guided me toward it. A warm, steady pressure that I was becoming accustomed to. His security men flanked us, eyes constantly scanning the street. Where to? He asked as we settled into the back seat. Home, I said, then hesitated. I should check on Lily first. He nodded once and gave the driver my sister's address. As the car pulled away from the curb, he took my hand, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. Thank you for tonight, I said, watching the city lights blur past the window. For what? Dinner? For making me feel, I searched for the right word, important, seen. His fingers tightened around mine. You are important, Emma. Whether you're with me or not doesn't change that. The car pulled up to Lily's building, and I reached for the door handle. I won't be long. I'll wait. Lily was awake when I let myself in with my spare key. She was curled on the couch in the same position I'd left her in earlier, but her color was better, her eyes brighter. Well, Look at you, she said, taking in my dress. Hot date? I hesitated, then nodded, sort of. Her eyebrows rose. The mysterious guy from last night? Yeah. I moved to sit beside her on the couch. How are you feeling? Better. The new meds seemed to be helping a little. She studied my face. You're different tonight. Different how? I don't know. Lighter somehow. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Is that champagne I smell? Where did he take you? Just dinner. I tried to sound casual. Nothing special. Liar. But she was smiling. Tell me everything. For a moment, I was tempted to unload it all. Alexei's offer, his investigation into our lives, the sense that I was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. But the worry lines around Lily's eyes stopped me. She carried enough guilt about my sacrifices without adding this to it. There's not much to tell, I said instead. He's intense, wealthy, definitely used to getting what he wants. And what does he want? Me, I thought, completely, exclusively. I'm not sure yet, I lied. She reached out to squeeze my hand. Just be careful, Em. You always put everyone else first. For once, maybe think about what you want. What did I want? The question followed me back down to the waiting car, to where Alexei sat with patient stillness, his dark eyes finding mine as soon as I opened the door. She's okay, he asked as I slid into the seat beside him. Better today, I confirmed. The new medication seems to be helping. He nodded. Good. The drive to my apartment was silent, but not uncomfortably so. When we arrived, Alexei dismissed the driver with a few quiet words in what I now recognized as Russian, then turned to me. I'd like to see where you live, he said. I hesitated. My apartment was tiny, shabby. Nothing like the world he inhabited, but the thought of inviting him in, of extending this night just a little longer, was too tempting to resist. Okay, I said finally. Inside, my apartment looked even smaller with Alexei's presence filling it. He moved through the space with careful steps, taking in the mismatched furniture, the stacks of library books, the single window with its view of the brick wall of the neighboring building. It's not much, I said, suddenly self-conscious. But the rent is affordable, and it's close to Lily. He stopped in front of the refrigerator, where I'd taped up a handful of photos. Lily and me at the beach before she got sick. Our parents on their 20th anniversary. My college graduation, before I'd had to drop out. Your parents? He asked, touching the edge of the photo lightly. I nodded, moving to stand beside him. They died coming home from their anniversary dinner. Drunk driver ran a red light. His jaw tightened. And the driver? Walked away with a concussion and 6 months probation, I said. The bitterness I thought I'd buried years ago rising to the surface. He had a good lawyer. Alexei's hand covered mine, warm and solid. Justice is rarely served by the system designed to deliver it. I looked up at him. Really looked, seeing past the expensive clothes and intimidating security to the man beneath. There was a hardness there, yes, but also something else. An understanding of loss, perhaps. Of injustice. What happened to you? I asked softly. To make you who you are? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that I'd cut so quickly to a question most would be afraid to ask. A story for another time, he said, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. If you decide there will be another time. The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. I was acutely aware of how close he was, of the heat radiating from his body, of the subtle scent of his cologne. I should go, he said finally, though he made no move to release my hand. You need time to think about what I've offered. And if I say no? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes darkened. Then I walk away. I won't force you, Emma, but understand this. If you say yes, there's no going back. I don't share what's mine, and I don't let go easily. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. And if I say yes, what happens then? Then you'll never have to worry about money again. Your sister will have the best care available, and you'll be mine. His free hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who radiated such contained power. In every way. My breath caught in my throat as his thumb brushed across my lower lip. I need time, I whispered. Take it, he said, his voice low. But not too much. I'm not a patient man, Emma. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of my shabby apartment, with my lips tingling from his touch, and his offer echoing in my mind. Be mine. Exclusively. Completely. I moved to the window, watching as he emerged onto the street below. One of his security men materialized from the shadows, speaking urgently into his ear. Alexei nodded once, his expression hardening. He looked up, his eyes finding my window unerringly, as if he could sense me watching. For a moment, our gazes locked across the distance. Then he slid into the waiting car and was gone. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my mind racing with possibilities, with fears, with wants I'd denied myself for too long. For once, maybe think about what you want. Lily's words came back to me as I turned from the window. What did I want? Security? Safety? To be free from the constant grind of barely getting by? Or did I want him? The question followed me into dreams filled with dark eyes and whispered promises of belonging. Morning came too soon, sunlight filtering through my thin curtains and pulling me from restless dreams. I reached for my phone, half expecting to see a message from Alexei, but the screen was empty. No texts, no missed calls. Just the usual notification reminding me to take Lily's prescription refill to the pharmacy. Reality crashed back, washing away the lingering sensations of last night. I had a shift at the diner in an hour, followed by a late afternoon at the library. No time to dwell on dark eyes and impossible offers. I went through my morning routine mechanically. Shower, dress, coffee from the cheap machine that made everything taste vaguely burnt. As I locked my apartment door, I found myself glancing toward the street, half expecting to see a sleek black car waiting. There was nothing but the usual morning traffic and a neighbor walking her dog. The diner was busy, the morning rush of commuters grabbing coffee and breakfast sandwiches keeping me moving at a frantic pace. It was almost noon before I had a moment to breathe, to let my mind wander back to last night. Earth to Emma, Rosie said, snapping her fingers in front of my face for the second time in as many days. You're a million miles away again. I forced a smile. Sorry, didn't sleep well. She raised an eyebrow, her weathered face creasing with concern. You pushing yourself too hard again? You know I can cut back your hours if— No, I said quickly. Too quickly. I couldn't afford to lose a single shift. I'm fine, really. Just distracted. She didn't look convinced. Well, while you were in La La Land, Table 9's been trying to get your attention. I turned toward Table 9, an apology already forming on my lips, and froze. Alexei sat alone in the booth, his dark suit and perfectly combed hair making him look wildly out of place among the diner's formica tables and vinyl booths. His security was nowhere to be seen, but I had no doubt they were close by. You know him? Rosie asked, noting my reaction. Sort of, I managed. I'll handle it. I approached the table, my heart hammering against my ribs. This is a surprise. Alexei looked up, his dark eyes capturing mine. Is it? I told you the next time I saw you wouldn't be by chance. I meant the location, I clarified, gesturing vaguely at the diner with its lunch crowd of blue-collar workers and office assistants. This doesn't seem like your usual scene. The corner of his mouth quirked up. I wanted to see you in your world. Why? To understand what I'm asking you to leave behind. The directness of his answer caught me off guard. Before I could respond, he continued. I've been watching you for the past hour. How hard you work. How everyone takes from you, your time, your energy, your attention, and gives so little in return. His eyes narrowed slightly. The man at the counter who complained about his eggs being too cold, even though the fault was his for spending 10 minutes on his phone before eating them. The woman who snapped her fingers at you when her coffee cup was empty, as if you were a dog to be summoned. Your manager, who hasn't noticed that you've been on your feet without a break since you arrived. I glanced toward the counter, where Rosie was pretending not to watch us. Rosie's good to me. She's flexible with my schedule when Lily needs me. The bare minimum of human decency isn't something to be grateful for, Emma. He leaned forward slightly. You deserve more. Is that what you're offering? More? Everything, he said simply. Everything you need. Everything you want. Everything you haven't let yourself dream of having. A group of construction workers came in, filling the last empty tables with boisterous conversation. Rosie shot me a meaningful look. I have to get back to work, I said, taking a step back. Alexei reached out, his fingers circling my wrist with gentle but unmistakable possession. When do you finish? 2. But I have another shift at the library at 4. His jaw tightened slightly. Cancel it. I can't just... Yes, you can. His thumb traced small circles on the inside of my wrist, sending shivers up my arm. Call in sick. Spend the afternoon with me instead. I should have pulled away. Should have told him I needed the money. That I had responsibilities. Instead, I found myself nodding. Okay. Something like triumph flickered in his eyes. He released my wrist and sat back. For the next 2 hours, I was hyper-aware of his presence as I served other tables, filled coffee cups, cleared plates. Occasionally, I would glance over to find his eyes on me, dark and intent. He nursed a single cup of coffee, ignoring the curious looks from other customers. At 2, I untied my apron and collected my things from the back room. Rosie cornered me before I could leave. Who's the suit? She asked, nodding toward Alexei. He's been watching you like a hawk all morning. Just someone I met, I hedged. Her eyes narrowed. He looks... intense. He is. You be careful, Emma, she said, concern evident in her voice. Men like that, they're used to getting what they want, and when they don't... I'll be fine, I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. I'm just going to spend the afternoon with him. And the library? I hesitated. I'm going to call in. She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Well, have fun. And remember, you've got nothing to prove to anybody, least of all some rich guy in a fancy suit. I nodded, though her words rang hollow in my ears. The truth was, I had everything to prove, to Lily, to myself, to the world that seemed determined to keep me struggling just to survive. Alexei stood when I emerged from the back, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed strangely fitting despite the shabby surroundings. Outside, a different car than the ones from before, this one a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows, waited at the curb. One of his security men held the door open. Where are we going? I asked as we settled into the back seat. To see a specialist, Alexei replied cryptically. A specialist? For your sister. I stiffened. I didn't agree to anything yet. His expression remained impassive. This isn't conditional, Emma. Whether you accept my offer or not, I want Lily to have proper care. The car wound through the city, eventually pulling up to a sleek medical building in the most expensive part of downtown. Inside, we were escorted immediately past the reception desk to a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. What is this place? I asked as the elevator ascended silently. The Volkov Medical Center, Alexei replied. My family's foundation funds research into autoimmune diseases, among other things. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked more like the lobby of a luxury hotel than a doctor's office. A woman in a tailored suit greeted us with a deferential nod. Mr. Volkov, Dr. Lin is waiting for you. Dr. Lin turned out to be a petite, sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor that put me immediately at ease. She listened intently as I described Lily's condition, her treatments, the progression of her disease over the years. I'd like to examine her, of course, Dr. Lin said when I finished. But from what you've described, I believe we could significantly improve her quality of life with a more aggressive treatment approach. Her insurance won't cover most experimental treatments, I said, the familiar weight of frustration settling in my chest. Dr. Lin glanced at Alexei, then back to me. That won't be an issue. The Volkov Foundation covers all treatment costs for patients in our research programs. I turned to Alexei, who was watching me with that same intense focus. Why are you doing this? You don't even know Lily. I know you, he said simply. And I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer when you're powerless to help them. There was something in his voice, a hidden pain, a memory, that made me wonder again about the experiences that had shaped him. Before I could ask, Dr. Lin handed me her card. "Have your sister call me to set up an appointment," she said. "The sooner we can begin, the better." Outside, back in the car, I stared at the card in my hand. It represented something I'd been fighting for since Lily's diagnosis. Hope, real hope. Not the desperate kind that came from cutting corners on my own needs to afford another specialist, another treatment that might not work. "Thank you," I said finally, looking up at Alexei. "Whether I accept your offer or not, thank you for this." He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "I told you, Emma, everything you need." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Alexei took me to a small, exclusive restaurant tucked away in a part of the city I rarely visited. We talked about Lily, about my parents, about books we'd read and places we'd been. He spoke of Russia, where he'd been born, of coming to America as a child with his father after his mother's death. "How did she die?" I asked, sensing the same shadows that hung over my own history of loss. "She was killed," he said, his voice flat. "By men who wanted to send my father a message." I reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm sorry." He looked down at our joined hands, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I glimpsed something vulnerable beneath the controlled exterior, a shared understanding of grief, of the ways loss could reshape a life. The moment passed, and he withdrew his hand. "It's getting late. I should take you home." Outside, the afternoon light was fading, the city transitioning from day to night. Alexei's security men materialized as we exited the restaurant, forming a protective perimeter around us as we walked to the car. "Will you be at your apartment tonight?" Alexei asked as we drove through the evening traffic. "Yes," I replied. "I always check on Lily before bed." He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "I'd like your answer by tomorrow, Emma." The deadline, delivered in his calm, certain voice, sent a shiver down my spine. "That's not much time. It's enough. You already know what you want. The only question is whether you'll allow yourself to have it." The car stopped in front of my building, but Alexei made no move to get out. Instead, he turned to face me, his dark eyes searching mine. "One more thing," he said, his voice low. "Whatever you decide, I want you to be sure I don't offer second chances, Emma. Once you're mine completely." The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver through me. Half fear, half something else I wasn't ready to name. "And if I say no, then this ends. The offer for your sister's treatment stands. That's not conditional, but you and I—" He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "We go our separate ways," I nodded, understanding the finality in his words. "I'll have an answer for you tomorrow." His hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my lower lip in a touch so light it might have been imagined. Until then, I stepped out of the car into the evening air, feeling his eyes on me as I walked to my building's entrance. Only when I was inside did I hear the car pull away from the curb. My apartment felt smaller than usual, more confining. I moved through the space restlessly, picking things up and putting them down again, my mind racing with possibilities, with fears, with wants I'd denied myself for too long. At 9, I went to check on Lily as promised. She was sitting up in bed, her color better than it had been in weeks, a book open on her lap. "Hey," she said, smiling as I entered. "I was about to call you. I have news." I perched on the edge of her bed, noting the excited gleam in her eyes. "What kind of news?" "I got a call from a Dr. Lin at the Volkov Medical Center," she said, reaching for a business card on her nightstand, identical to the one in my purse. "She said they're doing a research study on lupus treatments and wanted to know if I'd be interested in participating. All expenses paid, Emma, even transportation to and from appointments." My heart stuttered. Alexei had moved quickly. "That's amazing." "I know. I looked them up online. They're like super prestigious, the cutting edge of autoimmune research." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You don't seem surprised." I hesitated, torn between truth and evasion. "I might have had something to do with it. What do you mean?" The guy I've been seeing, his name is Alexei Volkov. The medical center belongs to his family. Lily's eyes widened. Volkov. As in, the Volkovs? Emma, they're like billionaires. Old money mixed with new tech, and she broke off, staring at me. How did you even meet someone like that at that charity gala I worked last week? I said, fiddling with the edge of her blanket. We danced, and then it just sort of happened. She studied my face, her expression shifting from excitement to concern. There's more to it than that, isn't there? What aren't you telling me? I sighed, knowing I couldn't hide the truth from her, not when it affected her so directly. He's offered to take care of us, Lily. Both of us. Your medical bills, a new apartment closer to your doctor's, everything. Her eyes widened. In exchange for what? Me, I said simply. He wants a relationship, an exclusive commitment. A relationship? She repeated, skepticism clear in her voice. Men like that don't just offer to solve all your problems because they want to date you. What does he really want? I thought about Alexei's words. Be mine, exclusively, completely. I think he wants to own me, I admitted. Not literally, but he's very possessive, controlling. That sounds... Lily trailed off, clearly searching for the right word. Dangerous. Maybe, I agreed, but also liberating in a way. To not have to make every decision, carry every burden alone. I looked down at my hands, at the calluses from years of hard work, the chipped nail polish I never had time to maintain properly. I'm so tired, Lily, of struggling, of never having quite enough, of watching you suffer because I can't afford better care. So you'd what? Be his mistress? His kept woman? There was no judgment in her voice, just concern. I don't know exactly. That's part of what scares me. He's intense. Secretive. There are aspects of his life, his business, that I'm not sure I want to know about. You think he's involved in something illegal? Again, not a question. I nodded slowly. Probably. Yes. Lily reached out to take my hand. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. He wants an answer tomorrow. She squeezed my fingers. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But her eyes, so like my own, held mine steadily. Don't do this for me. If you say yes to him, make sure it's because it's what you want. I left Lily's apartment with her words echoing in my mind. Make sure it's what you want. But what did I want? Security? Safety? Freedom from the constant grind of barely getting by? Or did I want him? The question followed me back to my apartment, where I curled up on my worn sofa and tried to imagine what life with Alexei would be like. Luxury, certainly. Protection. No more worrying about bills or juggling multiple jobs, but also restrictions, expectations. His world would come with its own set of rules, its own dangers. My phone buzzed with a text. Alexei, open your door. My heart leapt into my throat. I moved to the door on unsteady legs, peering through the peephole. Alexei stood in the hallway, alone for once, without his ever-present security detail. He was still in the same suit from earlier, though his tie was loosened slightly, the only concession to the late hour. I opened the door, suddenly conscious of my worn sweatpants and faded t-shirt. I thought you were giving me until tomorrow. I am. His eyes moved over me, taking in the casual clothes with the same intensity he'd regarded me in the black dress, but I realized there was something else you needed to know before making your decision. He stepped forward, and I instinctively moved back, allowing him into my small apartment. He closed the door behind him, then turned to face me. What did I need to know? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. In answer, he closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. His hand came up to cup the back of my neck, firm but gentle, as he lowered his mouth to mine. The kiss was not gentle. It was claiming, possessive, a physical manifestation of what he'd been telling me all along. Be mine. Exclusively. Completely. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained the distance I needed to make a rational decision. Instead, I found myself responding with a hunger that shocked me, my hands fisting in the expensive fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. His arm wrapped around my waist, lifting me slightly as he deepened the kiss. I could feel the controlled power in him, the restraint that kept his strength in check, even as his mouth demanded a surrender. I was frighteningly eager to give. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed as if he was gathering himself. "That," he said, his voice rough, "is what you needed to know." I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "What?" "That this isn't just about convenience or arrangement." His eyes opened, dark and intent on mine. "I want you, Emma, not just your obedience or your companionship. You." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my last defenses. I reached up to touch his face, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Good." He turned his head slightly to press a kiss to my palm. "Fear keeps you alive. Fear makes you careful, but don't let it stop you from taking what you want." "What if I don't know what I want?" His lips curved in that barely there smile. "You know. You've known since the moment we danced." And he was right. Beneath the fear, beneath the practical considerations and the moral qualms, there had been a recognition, a sense that whatever this was between us, it was inevitable. "Stay with me tonight," I whispered, surprising myself with the boldness of the request. Something flashed in his eyes. Desire? Triumph? Possession? "Are you sure?" I nodded, beyond words. He studied my face for a long moment, then stepped back, putting a deliberate distance between us. "No." I blinked, confused by the rejection. "But I thought—" "When you come to me," he said, his voice low and controlled, "it will be with your eyes wide open, knowing exactly what you're agreeing to. Not in the heat of the moment, not out of loneliness or desperation, but because you've chosen it, chosen me, with full understanding of what that means." He moved to the door, his hand on the knob. "Tomorrow, Emma, I'll send a car at 7. Either you'll be in it, or you won't. And we'll both have our answer." Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of my tiny apartment with my lips still tingling from his kiss, and a decision to make that would change everything. I slept fitfully, dreams filled with dark eyes and whispered promises. When morning came, I moved through my routine in a daze, my mind still circling the same questions, the same fears, the same wants. At 6, I called Rosie and quit my job at the diner. Then I called the library and did the same. By 6:30, I was standing in front of my closet, staring at the meager collection of clothes, none of which seemed right for the occasion. In the end, I settled on jeans and a simple blouse, clothes that represented the life I was considering leaving behind. At precisely 7, my phone buzzed with a text. "The car is waiting." I took one last look around my apartment, at the life I'd built from necessity and sacrifice. Then I picked up the small bag I'd packed, just essentials, nothing I couldn't leave behind, and walked out the door. The same sleek black car from the day before idled at the curb, the driver standing beside the open rear door. There was no sign of Alexei. "Where are we going?" I asked as I slid into the back seat. "Mr. Volkov's residence," the driver replied, closing the door with a soft thunk that seemed to seal my decision. The city gave way to more exclusive neighborhoods, houses set back from the street behind walls and security gates. Eventually, we turned onto a private drive that wound through carefully landscaped grounds to a house that could only be described as a mansion. Modern, all clean lines and glass, overlooking the water. The driver led me inside, through a soaring entryway and into a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a spectacular view of the bay. Alexei stood with his back to me, looking out at the water, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "She's here, sir," the driver announced before disappearing, leaving us alone. Alexei turned slowly, his dark eyes taking in my presence, my simple clothes, the small bag I still clutched in my hand. Something passed over his face. Relief, perhaps, or triumph, before his features settled back into their usual controlled mask. "You came," he said, setting his glass aside and moving toward me. "I came," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I expected. He stopped a few feet away, studying me with that intense focus I was beginning to recognize. Are you sure, Emma? There's no going back from this. I took a deep breath. Before I answer, I need to know something. Ask. The businesses you mentioned, real estate, import-export, nightclubs, how much of that is legitimate? A flicker of surprise crossed his face, as if he'd expected a different question. Some of it, not all. Are you... Mafia? The word felt strange in my mouth, too melodramatic for the man standing before me, and yet somehow fitting. That's an oversimplification, he said, his tone measured. But yes, I'm involved in what you would call organized crime. My father built an empire in Russia. When he brought me to America after my mother's death, he established a new branch of that empire here. When he died, I inherited it all. Have you killed people? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes never left mine. Yes. I swallowed hard. Recently? Not personally. Not for some time. He took a step closer. I have people for that now. The frank admission should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I found myself nodding slowly, processing the information. If I say yes to you, would I be expected to participate in any of that? No, he said firmly. That part of my life would remain separate from you. Your only responsibility would be to me. And what exactly would that mean? Being yours. He closed the remaining distance between us, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. It means you live here, with me. It means you don't work, not at diners or libraries or anywhere else. Your job becomes taking care of yourself, and occasionally accompanying me to social functions. It means you answer to me, not to the world. And Lily? She'll have the best medical care available. A comfortable apartment nearby where you can visit whenever you want. Her bills, her medications, everything taken care of. It sounded too good to be true, and in my experience, things that sounded that way usually were. What's the catch? His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Exclusivity, loyalty, obedience in certain matters, primarily those concerning your safety. I have enemies, Emma. Being with me will put you in their sights. Hence the security. He nodded. They'll be with you whenever you leave the house. It's non-negotiable. I considered this, trying to imagine a life where my movements were constantly monitored, where I lived in a gilded cage, safe but never truly free. But hadn't I been living in a cage already? One built of necessity and obligation, with bars just as confining? One more thing, I said. I won't be a decoration. I need purpose. Something meaningful to do with my time. A smile, a real one this time, not the slight curve of lips I'd seen before, transformed his face. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. The Volkov Foundation can always use intelligent, compassionate people to help manage its charitable initiatives. If that interests you. It did. Tremendously. The thought of using Alexei's resources to help others like Lily, others who were struggling against a system that seemed designed to keep them down, was deeply appealing. So, he said, his hand sliding from my cheek to the back of my neck in that possessive gesture I was beginning to recognize. What's your answer, Emma? I looked up into his dark eyes, seeing the controlled power, the dangerous edge, but also something else, a loneliness that matched my own, a need that went beyond the physical. Yes, I said simply. I'm yours. The word had barely left my lips before his mouth claimed mine in a kiss that was both possession and promise. His arms wrapped around me, lifting me slightly, pressing me against the hard line of his body as if he could absorb me into himself. When he finally broke the kiss, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, pupils dilated with desire. You won't regret this, he said, his voice rough. I'll give you everything, Emma, everything you need, everything you want. I just want you, I admitted, the truth of it surprising me. The rest, it's just circumstance. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, wonder, a vulnerability I hadn't expected to see. His hand came up to cup my face again, his touch gentler than before. You continue to surprise me, he murmured. Most people want what I can give them. My power, my protection, my money. You're the first person since my father died who seems to want just me. The confession made my heart ache for him. How lonely it must be to never know if you were wanted for yourself or for what you could provide. I reached up to cover his hand with mine. I won't lie and say your resources aren't part of the appeal, I said honestly. I need help. For Lily. For myself, but that's not all this is. Not for me. He nodded, accepting the complexity of my motivations without judgment. Come, he said, taking my hand and leading me deeper into the house. Let me show you your new home. The tour was brief, just enough to orient me to the sprawling mansion with its understated luxury and state-of-the-art security. The staff, a housekeeper, a cook, a groundskeeper, greeted me with polite deference that suggested they'd been briefed on my arrival. Alexi's security team maintained a discreet distance, but I was acutely aware of their presence, of the way their eyes constantly scanned for threats. We ended in the master suite, a spacious room with the same floor-to-ceiling windows as the living room, framing the same spectacular view. The bed was massive, dominating the space, dressed in crisp white linens that looked impossibly inviting after my restless night. Alexei watched me take it all in, his eyes tracking my reactions. This will be our room, he said, the possessive pronoun sending a shiver down my spine. Unless you'd prefer your own space, at least initially. The consideration surprised me. No, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I made my decision. I'm not going to start by putting distance between us. Approval flickered in his eyes. He moved toward me, his intent clear in the predatory grace of his steps. I stood my ground, heart racing but resolve firm, as he reached for me. His kiss was different this time, still possessive, but with a patience that hadn't been there before. His hands moved over me with deliberate care, learning the contours of my body through the barrier of my clothes. Are you sure? He murmured against my lips. We have time. We have all the time in the world now. In answer, I reached for the buttons of his shirt, my fingers steadier than I expected, as I undid them one by one, revealing the tanned skin and defined muscle beneath. A scar curved along his ribs. Old, silvered with age, but substantial. I traced it gently with my fingertip. Knife, he explained briefly. A long time ago. I leaned forward to press my lips to the mark, a gesture of acceptance that made his breath catch. His hands tightened on my waist, then moved to the hem of my blouse, drawing it up and over my head in one smooth motion. What followed was a slow, deliberate claiming, his hands and mouth mapping every inch of me as if committing me to memory. When he finally moved over me, his weight supported on powerful arms, his eyes locked with mine. Say it again, he demanded, his voice rough with need. Tell me you're mine. I'm yours, I whispered, the words no longer frightening but liberating. Completely. His control fractured then, desire overriding restraint as he claimed me in the most primal way possible. It was possession, yes, but also connection, a joining that felt like coming home to a place I hadn't known existed. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the sheets, my head on his chest, and his fingers tracing idle patterns on my back, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The constant worry, the grinding anxiety of never having enough, had receded, replaced by a different kind of tension. The awareness that I now belonged to a man whose world operated by rules I was only beginning to understand. What are you thinking? Alexei asked, his voice rumbling beneath my ear. That I've jumped into the deep end without knowing how to swim, I admitted. His chest shook with silent laughter. Then it's fortunate that I'm an excellent swimmer. I propped myself up on an elbow to look at him, studying the sharp planes of his face, the dark eyes that watched me with such intensity. What happens now? Now, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. We begin. I'll have your things brought from your apartment. Anything you want to keep. The rest we'll replace. Tomorrow, we'll visit your sister, make arrangements for her treatment, and then... His hand slid possessively down my spine. Then we'll see what kind of life we can build together. A life where I belong to you, I said, testing the words, the concept. A life where we belong to each other, he corrected, surprising me again. I may be possessive, Emma, but don't mistake that for ownership. What I want from you can't be taken, only given. I settled back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. Outside, the sun was setting over the bay, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. A new day would come tomorrow, bringing with it challenges I couldn't yet imagine, adjustments to a life so different from the one I'd known. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I wanted to be. In the arms of a dangerous man who looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in his world. And for the first time in years, I felt not just safe, but free. Free to want, free to take, free to be wanted and taken in return. The irony wasn't lost on me, that in giving myself to Alexei, in accepting his terms and his protection, I'd found a liberation that had eluded me in my independent struggle. Stop thinking so hard, Alexei murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Together. The word echoed in my mind as I closed my eyes, surrendering to exhaustion and the soothing rhythm of his breathing. Whatever I had just stepped into, whatever dangers or complications awaited, I wasn't alone anymore, and that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of all.